What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel live stream today. I wanted to do this video because Demon Souls is getting ready to come out on PS5 as a remake, and I know a lot of people are showing what Demon Souls looks like. Everybody's seen that trailer for PS5, but most people today who play Dark Souls don't really know Demon Souls that well, and then the people who do know Demon Souls well and have played the whole series don't understand that it's not really the first installment. Demon Souls was not the first game from Software that was based on magic and kind of like a mythology, of medieval times, like, Bloodborne, Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and whatnot. Now, it's really hard to say for certainty, but the very first game that From Software made, it seems like they were headed in a direction where they really wanted to get to a third-person game like Dark Souls, but they never really commented on it or said anything really about the direction of the franchise. However, they did start in one spot and then kind of move to a different spot, and that is the Dark Soul founding father, who has pretty much come on board with From Software from the Armored Core series. If you've ever played Armored Core, they had a couple on the Dreamcast, I believe, had one, or no, the PS3. The PS3 had Armored Core 4 and 5, but the original ones were PS2. That was developed, those games were developed by the guy who is now in charge of Dark Souls franchise, which is, Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and Bloodborne and Demon Souls. Now, before that, From Software existed as a publishing company and making games, except they weren't with Bandai and Namco, which were two different companies. Bandai and Namco were separate until they merged. However, before that, From Software was being published by a company called ASCII Entertainment, and that was in the 90s. And that is where the very first franchise of games come from. And From Software produced a couple of games that were very good, and I'm going to show you guys exactly what games I'm talking about. They are the original games that From Software produced and published and made, whatever word you want to use to describe it. But in any case, these games were a lot more difficult to a degree than Dark Souls, and the graphics were nowhere near as good, of course, because it was first gen consoles, PlayStation 1, and it was exclusive to PlayStation. And I'm going to show you guys, here they are right here. I'm in my game room, so I'm going to show you guys. Here is where Dark Souls actually started. Now, the guy who designed the Armored Core series and Dark Souls, Bloodborne, stuff like that, he wasn't on board with From Software at the time. And I think that Dark Souls is kind of the direction that From Software wanted to go, but they had nobody at that time, and they ended up getting the guy from the Armored Core series and brought him on board. Now he's the president of the company. But this game right here is where From Software started, and it's published by ASCII Entertainment. Like I was telling you, it's called King's Field, and this is a very similar game to Dark Souls. You can see how you can buy like keys and you get blueprints for weapons, and it's very much in the time of Dark Souls, where you fight skeletons and whatnot, and different types of demonic evil things. It very much, the music and the gameplay, the style of the game to a degree is Dark Souls. If you take the actual controls, the first-person view out of the equation and forget about graphics, the direction of the game and its kind of spooky, gothic, fantasy-driven dragons and monsters kind of theme, it is literally pre-Dark Souls. Dark Souls. It really is. And the graphics were not the greatest, but at the time they were great. It had the most eerie music. You go through these rooms and you could just hear these loud swooshes of hammers and axes coming down trying to kill you. And that was the original Jewel Box one. Then they released this one here in 97. And I believe the first Dark Souls here was 95. Really, really cool how they had two different versions of the game that had come out, but that was not the only one. Then there was King's Field 2, which had considerably better graphics at the time. If you go back now and look at it, they're really not a whole lot better. They're definitely better, but it's not drastic. But for the time, it was much sharper polygons and a little bit more rounded polygons, and not so like, I don't know, It just wasn't as ugly as far as graphically if you look at it now, but it was a great game. It really was. Like the magic system you can see here, you could create firewalls of magic and use arrows and swords. You had health points and magic points. This is where Dark Souls started. This was the original. There was even another game that was very similar called Clock Tower, which was very hard to get. And then here we go right here, Demon Souls for the PS3. I've got the original one that came out, and of course the Dark Souls. Now I've got them all on PS4 as well. I have pretty much every From Software game ever released. All the Armored Core, as you can see, Armored Core 4 and 5 are right here. And then I do have the other King's Field, which is right here, which the Ancient City was the one that came out for PS2. Much better graphics than, of course, than the one on the PS1. Really good game. This was a good game. Not as good as the original, but really good, but better graphics, though. So it kind of makes it hard to compare because you felt more immersed in the environment. So, you know, with the Demon Souls remake coming out, I really wanted to play Demon Souls for PS3, and I put about 12 to 15 hours into this game a couple of years ago, and it's really hard because when you're hollowed, you can't come back to life without doing missions that help other people. So there has to be others online in order for you to help them. Otherwise, you can't come back to life or reverse the hollowing. So you can't play the game really to its fullest, and it's almost impossible to do anything with this game because there's nobody on it anymore. And it's just, like I said, really difficult. Atlas did produce this. This was at a time before Bandai Namco picked them up. Now, Bandai Namco has also produced another game called Lords of the Fallen. And that is a fantastic game. In fact, I think that was better than Sekiro, a lot better. I think Sekiro was kind of, I don't know, a hot mess. I just didn't like it. I don't know why. It just didn't appeal to me. I tried it, and I just did not like it. I really liked Lords of the Fallen better, a lot better. Lords of the Fallen was a great game, slower than Dark Souls. I would probably say that Lords of the Fallen would be more like Demon Souls, slower, more methodical, and a hell of a lot more difficult than Dark Souls 2 or Dark Souls 3. Now, I do have all the Dark Souls games. I have 1, 2, and 3, and Bloodborne. So what is your guys' favorite games from Software? Are you King's Field fan? Are you a Dark Souls fan? Do you like the Bloodborne series? Which one do you guys like the most? And which video game has From Software made and published that you like the most? I'm going to tell you guys mine. I did like Bloodborne, but it was a little bit odd and weird, and I don't know, it was just a little out there. There was always brains and weird gooey guts kind of thing. It was just like really out there, and I liked it. But I would have to say that if I had to choose between all the games they ever did, I think that Dark Souls 3 was the best. And I think 3 was the most polished Dark Souls they ever did. It was smooth, flawless, no issues. The gameplay was awesome. Online play was the best of the entire series. I think Dark Souls 2 is right behind them. I don't think that it's too far off. I think that Dark Souls 2 is a really good game, but it was not produced and published, or wasn't produced and created by the same guy who made Dark Souls 3. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there in creators and who created what game, but that's for definitely another video. The guy who created Dark Souls 1, I believe, and Dark Souls 3, same guy. Dark Souls 2 is the guy who created another game. I can't remember what game it was, but they're two different guys that created them, and that's why Dark Souls 2 is completely different than Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 3. I think 2 is a really good game. It was a lot longer. If you're a really good Souls player, you can really run through Dark Souls 3 in probably, I would like to say 30 to 40 hours, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but I would say 30 to 40 hours it can be achieved. Whereas Dark Souls 2 was more like a 60 or 70 hour game. In fact, by the time I was done unlocking everything and I did both DLCs, it was probably closer to a 150 hour game or 200 hour game getting everything done. It was a very long Souls game. You could beat 3 a lot faster. In fact, I beat Dark Souls 3 7 or 8 times in the same amount of time it took me to beat Dark Souls 2 once and start a second playthrough. So it was a lot shorter of a game. Dark Souls 1 was very difficult and somewhat longer than 3. So if you look at them in length, it would be the longest would be Dark Souls 2. The shortest would be Dark Souls 3, and 1 is somewhere in between. Now, Demon Souls, on the other hand, is not a long game in comparison to Dark Souls 2, but it's extremely difficult. Dark Souls, in general, is easier than Demon Souls. Demon Souls is a lot harder than Dark Souls. So if you guys haven't played Demon Souls and you're just, looking to go back and play it when it comes out for the PS5 because you've played all the recent Dark Souls games, understand that Demon Souls is extremely difficult. It does not play the exact same as Dark Souls. It's a little bit slower, a lot harder, and requires a lot more patience and timing. Very hard game. So just want to touch base on the history of Dark Souls so that you guys could see exactly where From Software started. And if you like it and want to see more of my game collection and the history of these games, I have a lot of videos coming out on that as well. Be sure to share the channel, tap the bell notification, subscribe if you haven't already. And, of course, like the video and comment below. What do you guys think? But I'm going to be on the live streams tonight. Take care, guys. Be safe. Have a great day. I'll see you all soon. Peace.